Good morning. Welcome to Wake and Take. I am Budget Jason. Hi, I'm Toomey. That's my real name. My name's Toomey. I'm filling in for Jason. This is the last fill-in for this spot before we get our Jason back on this show. I'm going to try to match his energy, match his takes, but you're probably going to get 50% of both. But knowing Jason, that's still a really good show. Okay. Today we're going to talk about like 5 earth-shattering, flaming hot takes that I truly believe in, but that are going to really shift exactly what you think about the fantasy football season, especially in redraft leagues. These are amazing takes, if I do say so myself. And we're going to go through all 5 of them. The first one relating to everyone's favorite running back, Christian McCaffrey. And then after that, we're going to get into some of the latest news and updates and stuff like that on the show. So let's hop in, guys. Let's strap up, hug your loved ones. We're going off the deep end early. Okay. First take. There's 5 of these. First blazing hot take. Christian McCaffrey's going to be a bust. Christian McCaffrey will be a bust in fantasy football this year. Currently, he's going at the 101, and we all know Christian McCaffrey is an amazing player. But Christian McCaffrey will be a bust in fantasy football in 2024. No, I'm not talking about the Madden curse. And no, I'm not talking about the fact that he's like the number one on a consistent basis like over the last 2 years. But I will say, I guess relating to that, the big reason that I'm concerned about it is his usage and his age, and obviously a combination of those two. We love Christian McCaffrey. He is truly the bell cow of bell cows, workhorse of workhorses. No matter what format, he obviously excels in PPR as well. But we've seen this happen. We've seen this story before, and I feel like we're just being blind to the massive point advantage we get if we have CMC on our teams, and we're not really thinking about what does that mean, because no matter what, age comes for everyone. That check comes, I don't know, what is the saying? It's like your check comes twice a day. Clock strikes, right? I told you you're getting budget. You're getting Dollar Tree Jason today. But basically, like, it comes for everyone. If you are a running back who gets that much usage, you just deal with you break down. So the last time that Christian McCaffrey had 403 carries, which is what he had a couple of years ago, he missed 13 games the next season. 13 games. He missed 13 games with various different injuries. And so he just is not injury prone. I wouldn't say that because he's been really healthy in San Francisco. But he really just, it's like there's a certain amount of touches that you just got to stay under for a player like CMC. That year he led the league in touches. This past season, what did he do? Led the league in touches. He had a career high touches if you include the playoffs, which count on from an impact standpoint to your body. He led the league with 417 touches, including the playoffs. And that's really concerning, obviously, based on the last time he had over 403, he missed 13 games the next year. But if you think about specifically his age, so he is 27, I believe he's going to be 28 heading into the season, but he was at least 27 when he did that this past year. 5 of the last 7 running backs who were 26 and older, and who also were like league leaders in touches, 5 of the last 7 missed 8+ games. That's the APs of the world. That's the Arian Fosters. We have Derrick Henry was in that mix too. Like, they miss 8+ games, a lot of times with multiple injuries, but obviously with like sometimes a season ender. I am scared shitless about that. Like that is a huge concern for me. A huge concern for me. I think that there's been a lot of things also in the news that gives me a little bit of pause against CMC being a bust. Like, I think that they are truly going to try to do one of two things. They're really going to try to integrate Garendo and obviously Elijah Mitchell, which they keep talking about. And I do think that if they're able to do that, I think CMC, maybe he could avoid the injury bug. But if you're talking about the number one player overall, you're not going to get that upside if they truly try to manage him and save him for like a playoff run, because they tend to do that sometimes with these older backs who are on good teams. Or they're not going to learn any lessons from Christian McCaffrey, from all these older running backs, like I've mentioned, You're going to overwork him. He's going to go crazy in the beginning of the season, then you're going to lose him to some injuries. And in that situation, I think like if you're taking him with the 101, like I actually now think that is insane to do. I am taking CeeDee Lamb with my number 1 overall pick if I have it, and I'm happy to do it. I feel so much safer with him. I feel so much safer with his situation. Dak and him are going to get signed, so I'm not worried about that. Target competition, nothing on the team. Jake Ferguson's the number 2. The defense, I do think, is going to take a step back. I actually think that they're not going to be like running away with the division this year, and they're probably going to be chasing the Eagles, and they're going to have to throw a lot. Everything's there for him. The red zone opportunities are still going to be there for him. Even if Zeke is there, it's not going to crush his red zone opportunities. Like, there's so much upside for CD, and I am so deathly concerned about the age and the usage on CMC that I do think it's a problem. Other things to consider with San Francisco, talking about a team maybe taking a step back. I would not be surprised if they took a little step back. Not even just because of the Super Bowl slump, which is real, like we saw kind of with Philly last year. I do think they're still a playoff team like Philly, but maybe it doesn't look as pretty like Philly did last time. Two of the big factors that really are scaring me. I don't know if it's guaranteed that they sign Brandon Ayuk. Like, I really was bullish on that, but I'm concerned now that they may not sign him. And while a lot of people don't think that he's an elite player, I'm here to tell you that he is. I'm here to tell you that he's an elite player and that he makes a significant difference, probably more so than any receiving threat on that team in the passing game. Not the blocking. George Kittle's a better blocker. Ayuk's really good, too, down the field. He actually, like, a lot of those big CMC runs, you'll see Brandon Ayuk, like, shoving some DB or a safety down the field. But if they don't have Brandon Ayuk, that passing game is going to be significantly less efficient. So Brandon Ayuk he's kind of crazy great at like everything. He just doesn't get a ton of opportunities. Like his target share, he was like 18th in the league in target share, and you could imagine like it should be significantly higher if he was on any other team but the Avengers there. His red zone target share was trash last year too. He was only 16.4% targets in the red zone. But he was third in yards per route run with 3.18, which is crazy. He was also second in EPA for his team. So his team was able to produce more points than expected. Second most rate out of any receiver in the NFL with a plus 107.3 rating. That's insanity. Now, if you do not have that on your offense, I love some Ricky Pearsall, but that's not the same thing, guys. It's not close. He's significantly better than Debo as a true receiver to me. And that's going to grind that offense to a halt. Like, I do think not having Brandon Ayuk is going to be a problem. And then you will probably start to overload CMC and then lead to injury there. Next, defensively. I also don't think, I think that we're not, like, we just say San Francisco is a great defense. They got Nick Bosa, whatever. They'll be fine. Fred Warner. And I get it. They're going to always be like a top 15 unit. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're outside the top 10. Like, obviously, you got Bosa. His health matters. You lose Eric Armstead, which I think people are sleeping on that impact, too. Like, I think his EPA, he had a negative EPA, or he created a negative EPA for the defense when he was on the field. So, negative 0.14, which is elite. Versus when he was off the field, it was like a 0.02 EPA, which is pretty good. But a negative EPA, just because of one defensive tackle, basically, the fact that he's not there anymore, he's on the Jaguars, that's a big deal. We saw the difference in that defense when he was on and off the field last year. You lost Greenlaw in the Super Bowl to the Achilles, which is super unfortunate, but to think that he's going to be back fully ready to go is like a pipe dream. Devondre Campbell's coming from the Packers, and he had a significant decline in play over his last 2 years. And I also, no one's impressed by their defensive back situation. You get Hufanga back, which is great. But other than that, we saw the defense backs get torn up down the stretch last year. So I think that we're just assuming they're going to be some great defense. And that may have some negative impact on CMC. Maybe not receiving, but again, total touches. If they're going to be so reliant on him, he could fall apart. All right, so first take. CMC is a bust. I am taking Breece over him in any format. I'm taking Bijan over him in standard leagues. But I'm not drafting CMC if I got a top probably 2 or 3 pick. All right, we're starting off hot, man. Next take, let's go. Hop right into it. George Pickens is going to be a top 5 wide receiver. I said it. George Pickens is going to be a top 5 wide receiver. Let's go. So, I think that this honestly doesn't feel like this should qualify as a hot take, but whenever I say it, people are up in arms about it. Because they're like, oh, Arthur Smith, we saw what happened last year. He's a terrible offensive coordinator, blah, 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 blah. And they miss me with that. Like, one, that is overblown. Overblown. I'm going to tell you why. But two, we just got to look at what he's done. Like, when he, without DJ, he was around like 17 PPR points per game. DJ's not there. He's on Carolina now. Like, the amount of targets that man just consumes is such a big deal, even if the passing goes slightly down, which it'd be hard to based on their pass rates last year. I think that the targets and just the pure opportunities, again, opportunities over everything in fantasy, that is enough of a reason for him to be significantly higher than his 5th round ADP. But that's just one part of the puzzle. Like, so let's talk about the style of player he is, and Arthur Smith in particular. A lot of people want to draw comparisons to what happened with the Falcons last year, but I mean, the quarterback play was, I mean, to say awful is disrespectful to the word awful. It was garbage, hot garbage last year. They were awful, 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 and Drake London couldn't do anything with that scheme. But stylistically, also, I think that George Pickens draws a much better comparison to a previous Arthur Smith player in his Tennessee Titan days, A.J. Brown. Now, A.J. Brown is just a better receiver than George Pickens, even at this point in his career. I'll never say different. Like, A.J. Brown's better than George Pickens. Stylistically, they're pretty similar. So stylistically, like, yards after catch, really similar. The fact that they don't ever get separation, very similar. Pretty decent contested catch. Like, they're very similar in those respects. So, like, let's do some of the breakdowns. Like, so George Pickens in 2023 versus A.J. Brown when he was with Tennessee, like 2020. That was one of the last years that Arthur Smith was with him in Tennessee. Target share, like, George Pickens was 33rd in target share. That's really awful. And again, that's going to jump up with no DJ. A.J. Brown was 9th in this Arthur Smith scheme, right? Red zone targets. George Pickens was not bad, 18.6%, but A.J. Brown was 20%. Air yard share. Both of them are not like the high, or no, both of them were like top 15. So George Pickens is pretty high there already with 37.8%. A.J. Brown was top 11 with 34.4%. Yards per route run. A.J. Brown, 2.76 yards per route run. That was elite. George Pickens is going to have to increase that as well. The yak, pretty similar. Like, George Pickens, 3.7 like yak per target. A.J. Brown, 4 yak per target. And then the EPA, pretty big difference. A.J. Brown was 74.1, and then George Pickens in 2023 was 25th with 46.1 plus. So A.J. Brown in 2020, this is what I'm expecting to see from George Pickens. Better EPA, better efficiency overall, better red zone opportunities, and the target share is going to jump up. And so, because again, stylistically, the way that Arthur Smith designs this scheme, I do think that George Pickens is a winner in that sense. And let's just talk about Arthur Smith's scheme, because everyone just wants to dump all over him based on what we saw in Atlanta. But I'm here to tell you, Arthur Smith's scheme is good. His passing scheme is good. It's just you need like a quarterback with a pulse to play it, and I mean he has that in Russell Wilson. So when you just look at even on like a routes perspective, he just does a great job getting the ball to the playmakers and letting them do something after the catch, right? So let's just talk about some of those plays. He ran the 5th most amount of screen plays when he was in Tennessee, and there's this number, the adjusted net yards per attempt is the ANY per Y, adjusted net yards per attempt. He had a whopping 6.8 on screens, which is solid. 7 yards on a screenplay. That's super dope. Drag routes, he ran the 6th most, and he actually ran the 8th most in Atlanta. And he's getting the ball a lot to his players with letting them do a lot in space. On some of the stuff down the field, he actually was 5th in the amount of digs, 5th and 6th in his years in Tennessee, with a crazy high 12.5 adjusted net yards per attempt. That was the best in the NFL. He was also the best in the NFL on curls with 7.8 yards on the adjusted net yards per attempt. And on seams, he had a crazy high 21.5 yards when he was in Tennessee. Like he produced big plays, and he also, again, put the ball in his receivers' hands and let them do work after the catch. We've seen reports already that George Pickens has been playing in the slot a decent amount. They are putting him around the formation and just getting him the ball, like putting him in the slot, letting him work on nickel corners, letting him work on safety sometimes. And then also you match that up with the Arthur Smith scheme, which is super run heavy, but that play action will get you. And a player like George Pickens, you get him the ball, let him go after the catch in the middle of the field. We've seen the highlights. Like, he can go crazy in that scheme. So I absolutely love it. Just speaking of, again, his scheme, Arthur Smith had a top 4 and top 9 scoring offense when he was in Tennessee the last time he was offensive coordinator. So all of this talk about Arthur Smith being a garbage offensive coordinator, head coach, he's trash. Offensive coordinator, he's proven to be great. And he has the tools in Pittsburgh to do the same thing. Pretty decent offensive line. The defense is going to help you out over there. The running game is going to be really good. And we're going to talk about that with one of my other hot takes. But, man, the passing game is going to be really efficient. And especially if you think about the target quality that George Pickens is coming from to what he's about to get with Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson wasn't amazing last year, but Cortland Sutton actually had the second highest target quality in the NFL last year. And he produced 10 touchdowns on that effort with Russell Wilson, who was like really focused on him. Compare that to George Pickens, who had the 43rd highest target quality in the NFL last year. Like, you gotta tell me, and make sure you guys subscribe and do all that stuff. Put it in the comments. What am I missing? George Pickens is going in the 5th round still. He's been going in the 5th round the entire summer, and that's not changed. They have not done anything to that receiver room. He's my number 13-ish like wide receiver, but he has top 5 upside, guys. Let's go. All right, so we're going to talk about a few more hot takes. One of my hotter ones yet is coming up on the other side of this break.
Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated ARs. And we added a bunch of features. I mean, individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league. The best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. Playerprofiler.com/draft kit. Playerprofiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
Go get it. $45. I mean, even for budget Jason, I can afford that. I can afford $45 to go get that draft kit. So you should definitely go do it too. Make sure you guys tap into that. Also, again, I say it ad nauseum. Tap into this channel. Make sure you guys are subscribing here. Subscribe to Player Profiler News. Subscribe to us on all platforms. We're there. And I'm Toomey on TikTok. I go by FF Strategist. So make sure you guys check me out over there. But you're going to get your Jason back tomorrow, okay? I know he has like a really good base here. Like, you guys really love him. Okay. But there's good reasons. He's really smart. All right, my next hot take. Anthony Richardson, AR5, will be a top 2 quarterback this year, and he may be fantasy MVP. Let that sink in. Anthony Richardson is going to be a top 2 quarterback this year and may win fantasy MVP. It's not hard to imagine why, obviously outside of injury, but I do think that people are not appreciating like the hyper efficiency we saw with Anthony Richardson when he was on the field. So he played 4 games, but he technically only played like 10 full quarters of football. And while, yeah, his per game stats are impressive, if you honestly take that per game data, and this is like funny math, take the per game data, extrapolate that to like a full season, the numbers are crazy. The numbers for him are crazy. Now, and I'm going to talk to you why I'm not as concerned about the injury risk too. But again, on a full season basis, Anthony Richardson was on pace for 1.2 passing touchdowns per game, 1.6 rushing touchdowns per game. 1.6, like 1.6 rushing touchdowns per game. Not 0.5, which is crazy great for a quarterback. 1.6, nearly 2 rushing touchdowns per game is incredible. And that puts him on pace for 29 points per game. He would have gotten around 500 fantasy points and nearly 100 more points than last year's QB1 Josh Allen. That is such a massive gap in upside. It is incredible. And the fact that we're still disrespecting this man, his ADP raised up a little bit, but I mean, he was going late 5th. Now he's going early 5th round in 12-team leagues. I don't know, man. I don't know. Taking crazy pills. I do think people are really concerned about a few things that are irrational, so I'm going to explain them. All right, so let's talk through the scheme. So many people are afraid about the JT effect, but let's talk about it. All right. It's going to be a run-heavy scheme. But when they do pass, they got the savant as their play caller and Shane Steichen. I think he's going to make things pop down the field. All right, so last year with Shane Steichen as the head coach / offensive coordinator, they were a top 11 scoring offense with Gardner Minshew. Top 11. There's no reason to think that they're not going to be top 10 with a fully healthy Anthony Richardson. Now, JT. Obviously, I'm pretty high on JT, especially in standard leagues. I do think he could potentially lead the league in rushing. He could lead the league in rushing touchdowns, and I think that there's a lot of upside for him. But even still, I still absolutely love Anthony Richardson because of his upside. So I think that JT is going to impact Anthony Richardson, particularly when it comes to like goal line attempts. I think that JT, if the Colts, let's say the Colts get down to the 5, I expect to see 2 JT rushes to 1 Anthony Richardson rush or pass. And then probably a field goal, but maybe they go for it again. And again, I probably would put the ball in Anthony Richardson's hands unless it's at the 1, then you're going to go for JT maybe. But I do basically what I'm saying is when they're at goal line, JT is going to get the ball a couple times before they throw Richardson at it. Like they're saying they're not going to change the way they play him, but I think that would be truly irresponsible for them to not adjust a little bit, especially when the defense is packed in, they're ready to take you out. Like, it doesn't seem like the proper place to put somebody who just dealt with like a season-ending shoulder injury. And so, yeah, so from a rushing touchdown standpoint, where I just said that he got the 1.6 on average per game last year, he's not going to do that. But I do expect, I mean, they only played 3 snaps together. His yards per carry is going to jump up. He's going to be able to make those big plays. And I do think, like kind of more similar to like a Lamar Jackson, he may be scoring from distance every now and then getting a close touchdown, but he's still going to have a pretty decent touchdown rate. So I'm not worried about the JT impact. I actually think it's going to help open up the rushing attack because we never saw truly Anthony Richardson with JT with them both being fully healthy and threats on the ground. Thinking about Shane Steichen, I mean, he ran the system in Philly for a couple of years. And if you think about the Super Bowl year when they had Miles Sanders there, Jalen Hurts, 13 rushing touchdowns, right? And a lot of that was a tush push first year that it came out. So a lot of that was that for sure. But he did run some out from distance. But Miles Sanders had 11 TDs. Now, for me, for the Colts, I actually think you should just kind of flip that. I think that JT is in the ballpark to get you like 13 plus TDs. And I think Anthony Richardson, he may get you like 8, but he could get you up to 12. Like he could get you up to that number. So I still think because of the rushing attack and because I think the Colts are going to be a top 5 rush attempt team per game, there's going to be all the opportunities in the world for Anthony Richardson to make something happen. And you're not even really talking about him in the air. Like him in the air last year wasn't good. I mean, you could see I'm a Colts fan, but him in the air, I'll be objective. Him in the air was not great, but there are so many things that he can work with. He actually is pretty decent from an accuracy standpoint when you get 20 plus yards down the field. I do think he's going to be able to take some of those deep shots, especially because of that new acquisition in A.D. Mitchell. One of the best route runners I've seen in a long time down the field, getting separation late in his breaks and late on his routes. And so Anthony Richardson, that's the type of player that he really needed because Alec Pierce just kind of hadn't stepped up into that. You obviously have Michael Pittman Jr., who's Mr. Reliable, who's going to help you on the short and intermediate stuff. Josh Downs, he actually ran a decent amount of deep routes last year. He could probably settle more into his comfortable spot in the slot. And then you have all these tight ends. You're getting Jelani Woods back, who is athletic as hell, And I'm biased, but he's super athletic. And that's another team who plays 3 tight ends a ton. So they're going to have all these tight ends who are really good pass catchers. You got Mo Alley Cox. You have Drew Ogletree, who's really solid. You got Kylan Granson, who's a really good receiving tight end, actually a pretty good blocker too on the edge. And then Will Mallory, who's from Miami last year. He plays a lot too. I think they're probably going to keep 5, maybe 4 tight ends, maybe use one as an H-back. But because of all those weapons, I mean, I just think that he could ball out, guys. I think that he could ball out. Now, injury, that's the biggest question. Like, I'm saying that he's going to be QB2. Really, I should probably say the quarterback position is going to be QB2 because this is the perfect situation for you in fantasy. You get Anthony Richardson at an amazing value in the 5th, but if he misses time, who's the backup? Joe Flacco. So, you're telling me I get Anthony Richardson in the 5th round, and I can get Joe Flacco with my literal last pick in my draft? If that, maybe I just want to on every week just pick him up before Anthony Richardson plays and just see what happens just to make sure he doesn't get injured. So you're giving me free insurance with amazing value with Anthony Richardson and all the upside in the world to be the fantasy MVP. Sign me up for that yesterday. Okay. So Anthony Richardson, top 2 quarterback, potential fantasy MVP, lock it in. Let's go. We're cooking today. Let's go. All right. Next take. Woof. This is another spicy one. And this is spicy because the impact, honestly, is not that big, but it's more spicy because there's so many people who are in love with a certain player. And they're just not open to the idea that this other guy on the same team is the clear wide receiver 1. And I'm talking about Green Bay. Dontayvion Wicks is going to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay by the end of the season. Dontayvion Wicks is going to be the number 1 wide receiver in that offense by the end of the year. Lock that into. All right, so why? Why am I saying that? Well, ask the coach. Ask the coach, ask the quarterback, ask all these players. They're really giving us a lot of hints like they think that he could really step up. Like LaFleur was comparing this man's footwork and his release package to Davante Adams. That's crazy business. And it's warranted. Like he's incredible at his release packages. He's incredible after the catch. He's incredible in a lot of the ways that Davante Adams was. And he honestly, as a rookie, like Davante Adams wasn't great. Dontayvion Wicks was really good as a rookie. So I do think that we are kind of sleeping on that for sure. Just looking at some of his skills, some of the things that really separate Dontayvion Wicks from his other receivers in the room there. This guy is always open, man. Like he had a 72% success rate versus man covers. That was number 1 in the NFL for a rookie, like wide receiver 4. His yards after catch is also crazy too. Like he truly turns into a running back. So he started playing a lot more like around like week 10 or so. But basically like from week 10 to week 18, he had 7.1 yards per catch. I think yards after catch per reception. That was 9th best in the NFL. He was dominating that for a team who was really, really, really struggling mid-season with yards after catch. And I also think that he is just so much more reliable than some of the other options. Not even really including health. I mean, he was 13th in the NFL in first downs per route run. That just really speaks to his ability to earn a target and convert for a first down. Like he really is just producing high quality whenever he gets his hands on the ball. And then he was 93% converting on third downs. Like he is locked in one of Jordan Love's potential favorite targets. I do think the way that Jordan Love was even talking about him, saying he's going to have a monster year, speaks to the fact that Dontayvion Wicks, based on his play alone, is just going to earn more snaps than some of these other receivers. So let's talk about him. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. All right, so Reed. I love Jordan Reed. I think a lot of us at Player Profile love Jordan Reed, and I think that from a skill standpoint, he's amazing. This just have a few concerns because one, I need them to use him in a different way. I need them to use him in a way that doesn't just turn him into a gadget player, but I'm struggling to see why they would change it. Jordan Reed ran the 6th most amount of design plays, like all the end arounds and like just specialty types of trick plays, for lack of a better term. He had the 6th most amount in the NFL. If they're going to really rely on him in that respect, I do worry about that when you add in a Josh Jacobs into this mix and a receiving back and a good explosive back like a Marshawn Lloyd. I do think that really decreases the necessity for some of those plays. So hopefully that turns into Jayden Reed running more routes downfield. But I just have a nagging suspicion that they're just going to use him on short and intermediate stuff still and not give him some of that play downfield and use him as a true wide receiver. Like they're using him as like a baby Debo, which I absolutely hate. So that's Jordan Reed for me. I just think, especially at his ADP, I would just rather take a shot on Wicks than take a shot on Jordan Reed. And I especially think that Wicks is just better at his receiving position than Jordan Reed is. Then we talk about Christian Watson. You don't have to guess why I'm not high on him. All these receivers actually at their ADP are honestly fine. Jayden Reed a little high. But Christian Watson, I'm just not going to deal with that hamstring, guys. I've dealt with that before. I mean, this guy's missed 11 games in 2 years. I don't want to call it a career on him, but I'm not going to play around with your different muscle mass sizes on your different legs. I'm just not interested. So to me, Christian Watson will be effective as long as he's on the field. I do not expect that to be more than like 50% of the games. And then we have Romeo Doubs, who, again, is solid. He's actually really reliable. But based on all those things I told you, all those advanced metrics, he truly is just like Wicks is just a better version of Romeo Doubs. And I think that we're going to finally see it this year. He's going to emerge as that wide receiver one in that wide receiver room. He's going right now. His ADP is wide receiver 118. It has not changed all summer. He's going in the 11th plus round. I've gotten him in like 14th round in drafts before. 12th round. I've gotten him 15th one time as well. So it's just another guy. Like, throw him on your bench. It's a free spot. And I think he's going to return the best value of that wide receiver room because he is the wide receiver one in Green Bay. All right, last one before we get to some quick news, okay? This one is pretty spicy, and it's like I feel weird because it's really spicy about the Steelers again. so Steelers offense, apparently I'm all in on Arthur Smith getting this offense together. Jaylen Warren will be a top 10 running back this season. Jaylen Warren will be a top 10 running back this year. Let that sink in. This is the last take. Let that one sink in. Jaylen Warren will be a top 5 guy. I think he's the next on that list of highly efficient, but maybe they don't get like 270 carries types of players like the Achans, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to jump into that echelon this season. So let's just look at some of his efficiency. So I think that is the biggest reason why I'm so high. Sorry, that's super gross. That's one of the biggest reasons I'm so high on him is because of his efficiency plus the scheme that he's getting with Arthur Smith. We talked about the scheme a lot when we talked about George Pickens and their ability to pass, but obviously Arthur Smith is a run-first guy. I mean, like over the last 4 seasons, his offenses have ranked no worse than 7th in rush yards or rush attempts per game. 4th, 2nd, and 7th. I think that is really, really, really beneficial when you think about Jaylen Warren. And when you think about the way that Arthur Smith really doesn't mind a committee. We all remember how frustrating it was when we had Bijan Robinson last year. And no matter how good he was, he only got 56% of the snaps, or 54% of the running back snaps 54% of the running back carries versus 46% for Tyler Algier, who was a significantly less talented player. I think the talent gap between Jaylen Warren and Najee is nowhere close to that. I actually think that Jaylen Warren's just more talented. But the fact that it's even a close call, I think that there's a good opportunity that they are close to that type of split as well with the Steelers. So let's just talk about the scheme. So based on Arthur Smith's last year, let's say that they get 522 rush attempts on the season. So based on the percentage breakdown, even if you take it lower than what Algier got, let's say you give Jaylen Warren 40%. Based on that, he's easily getting over 200 carries. And that is a big deal when you talk about his efficiency. He was incredibly efficient, like 7th in yards per touch. I think he was 7th per yards per touch. His yards per carry were 4.9, I believe. He was 6th in true yards per carry, 5.3 in regular yards per carry. Evaded tackles, he was 5th. Breakaway run rate, he was 3rd. This guy if you get the ball in his hands, he makes a play. And if you're going to give that type of player 200 touches, obviously his efficiency is going to come down slightly. So instead of being at 5.3 yards per carry, he'll probably be like at 4.9 like he was his rookie season. But if you take a player like that and you give him 4.9 yards per carry, you give him 200 touches, that's a G. Like you got a G right there. On the rushing. And we didn't even talk about the receiving yet. That's just the rushing. You may have a 1,000-yard rusher. And now let's talk about the receiving because that's really, 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 really juicy too. All right, so last year he had what was it? He had 74 targets, 61 receptions, and 370 receiving yards. He didn't have any receiving touchdowns, which I think will change this year. But he was a dog in the air, and I think that that's not going anywhere. A lot of people are concerned about like Cordero Patterson. One, they clearly brought in Cordero Patterson for like the kickoff rule. Two, when he was in Atlanta with Arthur Smith, he wasn't doing a ton of receiving work, especially after the first few games when he started playing like true running back. And so I actually am not concerned at all about Jaylen Warren's touches. I mean, he probably may cut into Najee's work if he actually makes it onto the field on offense. But I just think that this is just such an interesting situation from a receiving standpoint because Russell Wilson, like we talked about how he hyper targets his number one in George Pickens, but over the last 2 years in Denver, led the league in the amount of checkdowns. Or led the league in checkdown rate. And so while, yes, he's obviously going to be targeting his number one, like there's only going to be three real weapons to me that are getting a lot of receiving work. It's going to be Pickens, Freiermuth, and it's going to be Jaylen Warren. I think that he has an opportunity to still be at one of the like top 7 running backs in like target share and targets this season. And if you have a Russell Wilson who is so willing to just dump it off to his guy, Jaylen Warren can make something happen because he's also amazing after the catch. Like there's so many similarities between Jaylen Warren this past season and a pre-breakout Tony Pollard in 2021. Hyper efficient, quote unquote, satellite back who given a little bit more opportunity goes crazy. And I think that's what we're about to see this year. Because even like honestly, from a stat by stat standpoint, it's actually very similar. Like their efficiency, I think like Jaylen Warren was like 7th in yards per touch in 2023 and 2021 before he broke out. Tony Pollard was 2nd. Explosive run rate, they literally were both 3rd in breakaway run rate. Yards per yards per route run. Tony Pollard was 1st amongst running backs, and Jaylen Warren was 9th. Like they're just both super efficient, both in crazy high run schemes. Offensive lines, they're not as good as the Cowboys back then, but they're pretty solid. And then they also have a really inefficient number one running back. So while Tony Pollard, he broke out like crazy that year, Zeke also had 12 touchdowns last year. He was just incredibly inefficient. Najee Harris is really inefficient, guys. And they did not sign him on his 5th-year deal. So just like Tony Pollard, he's kind of auditioning for the starting role. And I'm not saying what's going to happen if Jaylen Warren got the starting job because that's not the case. He's still going to be splitting, so his efficiency shouldn't take a massive dip, but he's going to just get like probably 200 plus total carries and a ton of receiving opportunities. I don't know what we're talking about. Like I think that Jaylen Warren is very clearly a top 10 running back candidate. Tony Pollard that year that I keep mentioning was RB8 the next season. Jaylen Warren could do the same exact damn thing. So I'm not trying to hear it. So let's just recap the top takes. CMC is going to be a bust, especially at the 101. George Pickens, top 5 receiver. Anthony Richardson, top 2 quarterback, potential fantasy MVP. Dontayvion Wicks is the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. He's due for a breakout. And then Jaylen Warren is a top 10 running back. Whew. All right. Let's just round out with some of the injury news of the day. And I should have said this at the beginning. Clearly, I'm pre-recording this. So if you guys are talking to me in the chat, I'm sorry I'm not responding live. But yeah, it's pre-recorded. But let's just quickly run through some of these stories. Jonathan Brooks was placed on the active non-injury or non-football injury list. We were really hoping that he was going to be ready for training camp, but that's not the case. I do think you still like bank on him having a breakout second half of the year. But if you're banking on him like starting out hot for you, it's just not going to happen. He's good. I think he's going to be ready by week 1. It's kind of concerning he's not ready yet. Saints wide receiver Chris Olave was placed on the active non-football injury list as well. He was doing some off-season workouts. I think he had suffered a shoulder injury and currently he's dealing with like some back tightness. I'm not concerned about that. Like I do think he could come off that list at any time, and I expect him to be ready by week 1. I'll just keep an eye on that. Packers plays Jaden Reed on the active non-football injury list. Cleveland Plain Dealer reports that Nick Chubb ACL is expected to begin training camp on the active PUP list. No duh. I know people saw him squatting like 600 pounds. It still doesn't mean anything until I see him doing football stuff. So his week 1 availability is truly in doubt. Quinn Johnson's not going to be playing a ton this year unless there's an injury. It's reported that he's likely not going to be on the 11 personnel sets when they have 3 wide receivers. It's going to be Palmer, Lai McConkey, and probably DJ Chark, and they just signed him like this summer, so that's kind of embarrassing. All right, Pro Football Talks My Florio reports that the ball is currently in the Packers' court to get a new deal done with Jordan Love. He showed up for training camp. I'm not super concerned about it. It's funny, like, he was asked a question about his contract talks, and a PR person came in and it was like, sorry. Nope. Like, just shutting it down. So I do think a deal is going to get done. I think they're just keeping it in the house and out of the media. Lamar Jackson went home with an illness. I don't think there's any concern there. The Texans just signed Cam Akers, formerly of the Vikings. Dealt with 2 Achilles injuries over the last 3 seasons, so I think he's just trying to latch onto a team. Wouldn't be surprised if he's cut at the end of the summer. Caleb's probably going to play in the preseason. Wouldn't be surprised if he even played in the Hall of Fame game, which is exciting because that game's always like super boring. And then Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine could be battling out for the final roster spot in Broncos backfield. If you follow me, and I do the player profiler today on Sundays at 7, I've been saying this for multiple weeks. I think Audric Estime, like, you should take him now while you have the chance because his draft stock is going to go up. Would not be surprised if he just was a starter week 1. Would not be surprised that he just cut Samaje Perine or traded or cut Javonte Williams because Audric Estime has really good vision. He has decent vision, but he's a bulldozer. And he clearly was picked by this regime. So I do think he has goal line upside right away, even without some of these roster moves. But if there's any roster moves, he could really benefit because he's also really good in pass protection. That is it. You get your Jason back tomorrow. Thanks so much for hopping on this. Again, this is pre-recorded, but Jason will be live probably tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for hopping in the show, and we will see you later. If I could find the end screen, I always struggle with this. All right, guys. Peace out. Oh my gosh, I can't click it right.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.